This is not a story meant to scare you. It's a confession that was never meant to be heard. What you're about to listen to is real, or at least, it was real to the person who lived it. Welcome to True Horror Confessions. If you're brave enough to keep listening, subscribe now. Because once these stories begin, they don't let you go. I should have listened to my grandmother. She always said some houses remember things, hold on to them like a person holds a grudge. I thought she was just being superstitious, the way old people sometimes are. But now, after everything that happened at the Morrow house, I'm not sure what I believe anymore. All I know is that I spent 3 months living next door to something I still can't explain. And when I finally left, I left pieces of myself behind that I'll never get back. I took the job at Ridgewood Senior Care in March of 2021, right when the world was starting to pretend that everything was normal again. It was a live-in position, which suited me fine. I'd just ended a 5-year relationship that had consumed my entire adult life, and I needed somewhere to disappear for a while. The facility was small, just 12 residents in a converted Victorian mansion, and my room was in the old carriage house out back. Private, quiet, exactly what I wanted. The Morrow house was next door, separated from the facility by a tall wooden fence that had seen better days. I noticed it on my first day, the way you notice anything that stands out. It was a large house, 2 stories plus an attic, painted a faded blue that might have been cheerful once, but now looked tired and sad. The windows were always dark, the lawn slightly overgrown, the mailbox stuffed with circulars that no one ever collected. I asked Helen, the day nurse, about it during my first week. She'd been working at Ridgewood for almost 15 years, and she knew everything about the neighborhood. The Morrow place? She glanced out the window toward the fence, and something flickered across her face that I couldn't quite read. Old Mrs. Morrow still lives there, has for decades. She keeps to herself mostly. I've never seen anyone come or go, I said. Helen shrugged. She's elderly, probably doesn't get out much. Her son checks in on her sometimes, or maybe it's a nephew. Someone, anyway. That should have been the end of it. An old woman living alone in a big house, slowly fading out of the world the way so many of our residents were doing right here at Ridgewood. It was sad, but it wasn't unusual. It wasn't anything to think about, but I did think about it, more than I should have. The first thing I noticed was the light. Not a light that was on, but a light that moved. I saw it on my 3rd night at Ridgewood, when I was lying in bed in the carriage house, unable to sleep. Through my window, I could see the upper floor of the Morrow house, and there was a light drifting past the windows, slowly, like someone walking with a candle. It moved from one end of the house to the other, paused, and then moved back. I told myself it was Mrs. Morrow. Couldn't sleep, maybe. Getting a glass of water, the kind of thing anyone might do in the middle of the night. But the light moved again the next night, and the next. Always at the same time, somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning. Always that same slow drift from one end of the house to the other. Back and forth, like someone pacing, like someone keeping watch. I started staying up to see it. I don't know why. Morbid curiosity, maybe. Or maybe just the distraction of having something to focus on besides my own thoughts, which were not good company in those days. I'd lie in my bed with the lights off, watching that faint glow travel across the dark windows of the Morrow house, and I'd wonder what she was doing, what she was thinking, whether she was as lonely as I was. It was during my 2nd week that I first saw the man. I was taking out the trash behind the facility, around 9 in the evening, when I noticed someone standing in the Morrow yard. He was tall, thin, wearing dark clothes that made him hard to see in the failing light. He was just standing there, facing the house, not moving. I stopped, waited. He didn't move. "Hello?" I called, before I could think better of it. He turned his head toward me. I couldn't see his face clearly, it was too dark, and he was too far away, but I felt him looking at me. The weight of his attention, pressing against my skin, like something physical. Then he turned back to the house and walked toward it, disappearing around the side without a word. The son, I told myself, or the nephew, whoever Helen had mentioned, just checking on his elderly mother, the way family does. Nothing strange about that, but something about the encounter stayed with me. The way he'd stood so still, The way he'd looked at me without responding. The way he'd walked not toward the front door, like a normal visitor would, but around the side of the house, into the shadows where I couldn't see. I mentioned it to Helen the next day, trying to sound casual about it. "You saw him?" She stopped what she was doing and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Concern, maybe, or something else. "Did he say anything to you?" "No. He just looked at me and walked away." Helen nodded slowly. "That's probably for the best. He's not. He doesn't like to be bothered. None of them do." "None of them?" "The family." She went back to her work, clearly signaling that the conversation was over. "They keep to themselves. Best to leave them alone." I wanted to ask more, but something in her tone stopped me. It wasn't just reluctance. It was something closer to fear. The next few weeks passed without incident. I settled into my routine at Ridgewood, learned the residents' names and habits, figured out which ones wanted company and which ones wanted to be left alone. The work was hard but satisfying in a way my previous job in corporate marketing had never been. I was helping people, even if I couldn't help myself, but I kept watching the Morrow House. Every night, the same light drifting past the windows. Every few days, a glimpse of the tall man in the yard, always standing still, always facing the house, always disappearing before I could get a good look at him. And then I started noticing other things. The smell, first. It came and went, drifting over the fence on warm evenings, settling into my carriage house like an unwelcome guest. It was sweet and rotten at the same time, like fruit that had been left out too long, like something organic breaking down. I checked my own space for the source, cleaned obsessively, opened windows, but the smell wasn't coming from inside. It was coming from next door. Then the sounds. Late at night, when the light was making its rounds, I'd sometimes hear something through my window. Not voices, exactly. More like movement, heavy things being dragged across floors, doors opening and closing, over and over, as if someone couldn't decide whether to stay or go. And underneath it all, a low sound that might have been humming or might have been moaning, so faint I could never be sure I wasn't imagining it. I told myself it was an old house settling, pipes in the walls, wind through cracks in the siding, all the usual explanations that people give themselves when they don't want to face what they're really hearing. But the explanations started to feel thin. It was in April that I first saw Mrs. Morrow herself. I was walking back from the main building after my shift, cutting through the small garden that ran along the fence line, when I noticed a figure on the other side, an old woman, standing at one of the ground floor windows, looking out, looking at me. She was thin, painfully thin, with white hair that hung loose around her shoulders and skin that had a grayish pallor even in the afternoon light. Her face was expressionless, neither friendly nor hostile, just empty, like a mask, with nothing behind it. I raised my hand in a wave, the automatic gesture of neighborly acknowledgement. She didn't respond, just kept watching me with those empty eyes until I walked past and out of her line of sight. That night, the light in the upstairs windows moved faster than usual. Back and forth, almost frantic. And the sounds were louder too, more distinct. I could swear I heard footsteps, not one set, but many, moving through the house in patterns that made no sense. I lay awake until dawn, watching and listening, and when the sun finally came up, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a child. I felt afraid of the dark. The days were fine. During the day, I could almost forget about the Morrow House. I'd focus on my work, chat with the residents, help Helen with the medications and the paperwork and all the mundane tasks that filled the hours. During the day, everything seemed normal, but as soon as the sun started to set, the dread would begin to build, a tightness in my chest, a heaviness in my limbs, the knowledge that soon I'd be back in my carriage house, alone, with nothing between me and whatever was happening next door, except a wooden fence and a few yards of overgrown grass. I started making excuses to stay in the main building longer, volunteered for extra shifts, sat with residents who couldn't sleep, telling myself I was being helpful when really I was just avoiding my own bed. Helen noticed. Of course she did. One evening in early May, she pulled me aside after dinner service. "You look terrible," she said, not unkindly. "When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep," I said. "Just not well. Is it the house?" I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "The Morrow house. I've seen you watching it. I know you've noticed things." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to deny it, to insist that everything was fine, that I was just adjusting to a new job and a new life, and I'd be okay soon. But another part of me was desperate to talk about it, to have someone confirm that I wasn't going crazy. "What's going on over there?" I asked. Helen's face changed. The professional mask slipped, and underneath it I saw the same fear I'd been feeling, the same dread. "I don't know," she said quietly. "And I don't want to know. I've worked here for 15 years, and in that time I've learned to mind my own business. You should do the same, but I'm serious." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't ask questions. Don't go over there. Don't get involved. Just do your job and keep your head down and everything will be fine." She let go and walked away before I could respond. And I stood there in the hallway, more unsettled than ever, wondering what she knew that she wasn't telling me. I tried to take her advice. I really did. For the next 2 weeks, I forced myself to stop watching the Morrow house. I kept my curtains closed at night. I wore earplugs to block out the sounds. I pretended that the house next door was just a house, and the people in it were just people, and everything was exactly as normal as I wanted it to be. It almost worked, and then Margaret disappeared. Margaret Chen was one of our residents, 84 years old, with advanced dementia that left her confused most of the time, but occasionally, heartbreakingly lucid. She was a wanderer, the staff had warned me. Liked to get up at night and roam the halls. We had alarms on all the doors to prevent her from leaving the building, but on the night of May 15th, the alarms never went off, and Margaret was gone. I was the one who discovered it. I'd been making my rounds at 3 a.m., checking on residents who sometimes needed help in the night, when I noticed Margaret's door was open. Her bed was empty. The sheets were pulled back like she'd gotten up in a hurry, and her slippers were still on the floor beside the bed. I searched the building twice before I called Helen. By the time the police arrived, it was almost dawn, and we'd covered every inch of the facility without finding any trace of her. The police were thorough. They searched the grounds, the neighboring properties, the wooded area behind the facility. They put out alerts. They interviewed all the staff. They did everything by the book, but they never searched the Morrow house. I asked about it. I remember standing there with the detective, pointing at that faded blue house with its dark windows, asking why they weren't checking next door. The detective looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "The Morrow property? That's private residence. We'd need cause to search there. An elderly woman is missing," I said. "She could have wandered over there. The fence is 6 feet high," the detective said, "and Mrs. Chen could barely walk without assistance. From what I understand, there's no way she climbed that fence." He was right, technically. The fence was tall and solid, and Margaret was frail, but I'd seen the section near the back of the property, where the boards were loose and rotting, where even a child could push through. I'd noticed it weeks ago and made a mental note to mention it to maintenance. I mentioned it to the detective. He wrote something in his notebook and said they'd look into it, but I could tell from his tone that he didn't consider it a priority. Margaret Chen was never found. The official conclusion was that she'd somehow gotten out of the facility, maybe through a window that hadn't been properly secured, maybe through a door whose alarm had malfunctioned and wandered off into the night. At her age, with her condition, exposure would have been fatal within hours. They assumed her body would turn up eventually, in the woods or a ditch or some other place where confused elderly people sometimes ended up, but it never did. And I couldn't stop thinking about that loose section of fence, about the way the Morrow house had been so dark that night, darker than usual, as if every light inside had been deliberately extinguished, about the smell that had been particularly strong in the days following Margaret's disappearance, drifting over the fence on the warm spring breeze. I went back to watching the house. I couldn't help it. Every night, I'd lie in my bed with the curtains open, staring at those dark windows, waiting for the light to appear. And it did, always between 2 and 3, always making that same slow journey back and forth. But now there was something different about it. The light seemed brighter somehow, more substantial, and sometimes I could never be sure. It was always at the edge of my vision. I thought I saw a figure in the window alongside the light, small and hunched and moving with the shuffling gait of someone very old. I told myself I was imagining things, grief and guilt manifesting as hallucinations. I'd liked Margaret. Her disappearance had affected me more than I wanted to admit. It made sense that my mind would play tricks on me. But then another resident went missing. Robert Okonkwo, 79, recovering from a stroke that had left him partially paralyzed on his left side. He disappeared on June 3rd, 3 weeks after Margaret. Same scenario, empty bed, missing patient, no alarms triggered, no sign of how he'd gotten out. The police came back. They searched again. They questioned the staff again. And again, they found nothing. This time, I didn't bother asking about the Morrow house. I knew what they'd say. Instead, I started keeping my own watch. Every night, from sunset to sunrise, I'd position myself at my window with a clear view of the fence line. If someone was coming onto our property from next door or taking our residence in the other direction, I was going to see them. I saw nothing. Not that week, not the week after. Just the light in the windows, the occasional glimpse of the tall man in the yard, the same patterns I'd been observing for months. Whatever was happening, it wasn't happening when I was watching. Or maybe it was, and I just couldn't see it. It was Helen who finally told me the truth. Or at least, part of it. She found me in the garden one evening, sitting on the bench near the fence, staring at the Morrow house like I could make it reveal its secrets through sheer force of will. She sat down next to me without speaking, and for a long moment, we just sat there together, watching the light fade from the sky. "I've been here 15 years, she said finally. In that time, we've had 7 residents go missing. 7 that were never found. Always at night, always without explanation." I turned to look at her. Her face was tired, lined with the kind of weariness that goes deeper than sleeplessness. 7? I repeated. That can't be right. That would be investigated. There would be consequences. There were investigations, every time, and every time, they found nothing. The families were told their loved ones wandered off and died of exposure. The bodies were never recovered because they were probably taken by animals or hidden by the terrain. It was tragic, but not suspicious. Just one of those things that happens sometimes. But you don't believe that. Helen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've seen things, over the years, things I can't explain, things I don't want to explain." She nodded toward the Morrow house. "That family has lived there for as long as anyone can remember. Longer. People say old Mrs. Morrow was old when they moved to the neighborhood 40 years ago. She hasn't aged a day since. That's impossible. I know what I've seen." Helen stood up abruptly, as if she'd already said more than she intended. "I'm telling you this because I like you, and I don't want you to end up like the others." "The others?" "The people who ask too many questions, who got too curious, who decided they were going to figure out what was happening in that house." She met my eyes, and there was genuine fear there, naked and unashamed. "They're gone now. All of them. Quit suddenly, or moved away, or just disappeared. I'm the only one left who remembers." She turned and walked back toward the main building. I wanted to follow her, to press for more details, to demand that she tell me everything she knew. But something in her posture stopped me. The slope of her shoulders, the way she kept her head down, the almost furtive way she moved. She was scared, genuinely, deeply scared, and she wanted no part of whatever I was getting myself into. That night, I made a decision. I was going to find out what was happening in the Morrow house. Not for the police, who clearly weren't going to help. Not for the families of the missing residents, who deserved answers they would probably never get. I was going to do it for myself, because the not knowing was eating me alive, and I couldn't spend another night lying awake, wondering, imagining, driving myself slowly insane. I waited until after midnight, when the facility was quiet and everyone was asleep. Then I put on dark clothes, grabbed a flashlight, and slipped out of the carriage house into the warm June night. The fence was easier to get through than I expected. The loose boards near the back pushed aside with minimal effort, leaving a gap just wide enough for me to squeeze through. On the other side, the Morrow yard was overgrown and wild, the grass up to my knees, weeds and brambles catching at my clothes as I moved. The house loomed ahead of me, dark and silent. No light in the windows tonight, no movement, just that faded blue siding and those black windows, staring down at me like empty eye sockets. I should have turned back. I knew that, even then. Whatever was in that house, whatever had been taking our residence, it wasn't something I was equipped to face alone in the middle of the night. I should have gathered evidence, called the authorities, done anything except what I was doing, but I kept walking, toward the house, toward whatever was waiting inside. The back door was unlocked. It swung open at my touch, silent on well-oiled hinges, revealing a darkness so complete that my flashlight barely made a dent in it. The smell hit me immediately, that same sweet, rotten odor I'd been smelling for months, but concentrated now, overwhelming, making my eyes water and my stomach heave. I stepped inside. The house was wrong. I don't know how else to describe it. The proportions were off, the ceilings too high, the hallways too long. My flashlight beam seemed to fade the farther it traveled, as if the darkness here was thicker than normal, more substantial. And there was a sound, underneath everything, a low hum that I felt more than heard, vibrating in my bones. I moved through what had probably been a kitchen once, past cabinets with doors hanging open and appliances covered in dust, through a dining room where a long table sat set for dinner, plates and silverware laid out as if guests were expected at any moment, all of it covered in a layer of grime that spoke of decades of neglect. The smell got stronger as I went deeper into the house. It was coming from somewhere ahead, somewhere above. I found a staircase and started to climb, my flashlight flickering in a way that made my heart pound. The second floor was worse. The hallway stretched out ahead of me, impossibly long, doors lining both sides like cells in a prison. Some were open, some were closed, and from behind the closed ones, I could hear sounds, breathing, slow and rhythmic, like something sleeping, movement, the rustle of fabric, the creak of bed springs, and underneath it all, that low moaning sound I'd heard from my carriage house, louder now, more distinct, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I opened the first door. The room beyond was small and bare, containing nothing but a bed, and on the bed, lying perfectly still, was a figure I recognized, Margaret Chen. She was alive. Her chest rose and fell with each breath. Her eyes were closed in what looked like peaceful sleep. But there was something wrong with her, something I couldn't identify at first. Then I realized what it was. She looked younger. The lines on her face had softened. The age spots had faded. Her white hair had threads of dark running through it. She looked like she had in the photos her family had provided, photos from 20 years ago, before the dementia, before the decline. I stumbled back into the hallway, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. I opened another door, another bed, another figure. Robert Okonkwo, looking 20 years younger than he had when I'd last seen him, his stroke-damaged body, whole and healthy, sleeping that same peaceful sleep. I went down the hallway, opening door after door. Behind each one, another body. Some I recognized from photos in our files, residents who had disappeared years before I arrived. Others I didn't know, all of them sleeping, all of them impossibly young. The last door was different. It was at the end of the hallway, larger than the others, and the moaning sound was coming from behind it. I stood there for a long moment, my hand on the knob, knowing I should leave, knowing that whatever was behind this door was something I wasn't prepared to see. I opened it anyway. The room beyond was massive, taking up the entire end of the house, and it was full of people, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, lying on beds that had been arranged in neat rows, like a hospital ward or a dormitory. All of them sleeping, all of them breathing in perfect unison, their chests rising and falling together like some massive organism, and all of them young, impossibly young, their faces smooth and unlined, their bodies whole and healthy. At the center of the room, in a space cleared among the beds, stood a figure, the tall man I'd seen in the yard. He was facing away from me, his attention focused on something in front of him that I couldn't see, and beside him, standing so close their shoulders almost touched, was Mrs. Morrow. Except it wasn't the old woman I'd seen through the window. This woman was young, no older than 30, with dark hair and clear skin and a beauty that seemed almost inhuman in its perfection. But her eyes, when she turned to look at me, were the same empty eyes I'd seen before, the same mask with nothing behind it. She smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "You shouldn't have come here," she said. Her voice was low and musical, like wind through dead leaves. "But since you have, you might as well stay." The tall man turned around. His face was wrong, too smooth, too symmetrical, lacking the small imperfections that make a face look human, and his eyes were entirely black, no white at all, like holes cut in the fabric of reality. "Yes," he said. "You'll stay." They all stay, eventually. I ran. I don't remember making the decision. One moment I was frozen in the doorway, staring at those black eyes, and the next I was flying down the hallway, down the stairs, through the kitchen, and out the back door. I heard something behind me, footsteps, or maybe just the sound of my own terror, but I didn't look back. I just ran, through the overgrown yard, through the gap in the fence, across the garden, and into my carriage house. I locked the door, pushed furniture in front of it, sat in the corner with my flashlight clutched in my hands, waiting for them to come after me. They didn't come. Not that night, not the next day, not the day after that. I kept waiting, kept watching, but the Morrow house was quiet. No light in the windows, no movement in the yard. Just that faded blue siding and those black windows, exactly as they'd always been. I should have left. I know that now. I should have packed my bags that morning and driven away and never looked back. But I was stupid. I told myself that what I'd seen couldn't be real, that I'd imagined it, that I'd had some kind of breakdown brought on by stress and sleeplessness. I told myself that if I just acted normal, everything would be fine. I went back to work. I did my shifts. I smiled at the residents and chatted with Helen and pretended that nothing had happened. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. Those bodies in the beds. So young, so peaceful. Margaret and Robert and all the others, sleeping an endless sleep while something fed on them or used them or did whatever it was doing. Helen noticed something was wrong. She pulled me aside after lunch one day, her face creased with concern. "You went over there," she said. It wasn't a question. I didn't bother denying it. "I saw them, the missing residents. They're all there, in the house. They're alive, but they're different, younger." Helen closed her eyes like I'd just confirmed her worst fears. "You should leave. Today. Right now. Don't pack. Don't say goodbye. Just get in your car and go." "I can't just leave. What about the people in that house? What about the residents who are still here?" "There's nothing you can do for them. There's nothing anyone can do. I've watched this happen for 15 years, and I've learned the hard way that the only thing you can do is survive." "How? How do you survive something like this?" Helen opened her eyes and looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. It was resignation, pure and simple. The look of someone who had made peace with horrors beyond imagining. "You don't ask questions. You don't watch the house. You don't talk about what you've seen. You do your job and you keep your head down and you pray that they don't notice you." She gripped my arm hard enough to leave bruises. "And if they do notice you, if they come for you, you go quietly, because fighting just makes it worse. You can't be serious." "I'm deadly serious. I've seen what happens to people who resist. It's not pretty." She let go of my arm and stepped back. "Leave today. That's my advice. Leave today and don't ever come back." I didn't leave. I told myself I had my reasons. I couldn't abandon the residents. I couldn't run from something I didn't understand. I had to figure out what was happening before I could decide what to do. But the truth was simpler than that. I was curious. Whatever was happening in the Morrow house, it was the most extraordinary thing I'd ever encountered. It defied everything I thought I knew about the world. And some part of me, the same part that had drawn me to this job in the first place, couldn't walk away without understanding. So I started researching. The library in town had records going back over a century, and I spent every free moment there, digging through old newspapers and property records and census data. What I found was fragmentary and incomplete, but it painted a picture that made my blood run cold. The Morrow family had owned that property since 1892. The original house had burned down in 1923 and been rebuilt the following year. Since then, there had been a steady stream of incidents. Missing persons reports, filed and then quietly closed. Deaths attributed to natural causes, despite circumstances that raised questions. Complaints from neighbors about strange sounds and smells, investigated and dismissed. And through it all, the Morrows had remained, generation after generation, living in that house, aging but never dying, watching while the world changed around them. I found a photograph from 1952, a society page picture from some long-forgotten charity event. In it, a woman identified as Mrs. Eleanor Morrow posed with other local dignitaries. She was young and beautiful, with dark hair and clear skin. She looked exactly like the woman I'd seen in the house. I found another photograph from 1978, a newspaper article about a donation to the town library. The same woman, looking exactly the same age, identified as Mrs. Eleanor Morrow. And a third, from 1995, a mention in a real estate listing with a small photo of the homeowner, Mrs. Eleanor Morrow, unchanged, unaged, exactly as she'd been 40 years before. Whatever was happening in that house, it had been happening for a very long time. And whatever the Morrows were, they weren't human, not anymore. I should have taken this information to someone, the police, the press, anyone who might listen, but who would believe me? I had old photographs and newspaper clippings, not proof. I had theories, not evidence. Anyone I told would think I was crazy, or lying, or both, so I kept digging. And the more I learned, the more I realized that I was in over my head. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Every few months, someone in the area would disappear, usually someone elderly or isolated, someone whose absence wouldn't raise too many questions. The disappearances had been happening for decades, stretching back as far as the records went. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, vanishing into that house and never coming out. Not never, I corrected myself. They were still in there, in those beds, sleeping their endless sleep, still alive, after a fashion, but transformed into something else, something that served whatever purpose the Morrows had for them. I thought about calling the FBI. Surely something on this scale would warrant federal investigation. But then I thought about how I would explain what I knew, and I realized it would sound like the ravings of a lunatic. I had no bodies, no forensic evidence, no witnesses willing to testify, just my own story, which even I had trouble believing sometimes. The days passed. I went through the motions of my job, but my mind was always elsewhere, always turning over the puzzle, trying to find an angle I hadn't considered. I started sleeping during the day and staying awake at night, watching the Morrow house, looking for patterns, looking for weaknesses. The light still moved across the upper windows every night. But now I saw it differently, not as an old woman pacing, but as a guard making rounds, checking on the sleepers, making sure they were all still there. I started to notice other things too. Cars that would pull up to the house late at night and leave an hour later. Delivery trucks that arrived with containers I couldn't identify and departed empty. People who entered through the front door and never seemed to exit, at least not through any door I could see. The Morrows had an operation, a system, and it had been running smoothly for longer than I'd been alive. It was on a Thursday night in late June that I saw something that changed everything. I was at my usual post by the window, watching the house, when I noticed movement in the yard. Not the tall man this time, but someone else. A figure moving slowly, unsteadily, as if they weren't entirely sure how to walk. The figure made its way toward the fence, toward the gap in the boards where I'd slipped through weeks before. I grabbed my flashlight and ran outside, my heart pounding. By the time I reached the fence, the figure was already pushing through the gap, stumbling into our garden. It was a woman, young, maybe early 20s, with blonde hair and a face that seemed oddly familiar. She was wearing a hospital gown, thin and white, and her feet were bare. She looked at me with wide, confused eyes. "Help," she whispered. "Please, I don't know where I am. I caught her as she collapsed, her body light and fragile in my arms. Up close, I could see the marks on her arms, small puncture wounds, dozens of them, like she'd been hooked up to an IV for a very long time. "Who are you?" I asked. "How did you get out?" She shook her head weakly. "I don't remember. I was sleeping, and then I woke up, and I didn't know where I was. I just started walking." I looked back at the Morrow house. It was still dark, still quiet. If anyone had noticed her escape, they weren't showing it. "Come on," I said, helping her to her feet. "Let's get you inside." I brought her to my carriage house, wrapped her in blankets, gave her water. She drank greedily, like someone who hadn't had anything to drink in a very long time, and slowly, in fragments, she started to tell me her story. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. She was 24 years old. The last thing she remembered clearly was going to sleep in her apartment in a city 200 miles away, sometime in 2019. 2 years. She'd been in that house for 2 years. "They kept us sleeping," she said, her voice shaking. "Most of the time, we were just gone. Not awake, not dreaming, just nothing. But sometimes, I'd almost wake up. I'd hear things, feel things." She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the blankets. "There was a woman. She'd come around and I don't know how to describe it. It was like she was taking something from us, something we needed, and she was giving it to herself. Taking what? I don't know. Life? Time? Whatever it is that makes us get old." Sarah looked at me with haunted eyes. "I'm 24, but I went into that house when I was 22. I should be older, but I'm not. I haven't aged a day." "You got younger," I said, thinking of Margaret and Robert. "The people I saw in there looked decades younger than they should have." Sarah nodded. "We were all young. Everyone in there. The woman kept us that way, kept us young so she could take more. It was vampirism," I realized. Not the kind from movies, with fangs and blood, but something else. Something that fed on time itself, on the years that should have been lived, on the aging that should have occurred. The Morrows kept their victims young so they could harvest their time, over and over again, extending their own lives indefinitely while their prey slumbered in an endless artificial youth. "We have to call the police," I said. "With you as a witness, they'll have to investigate." Sarah grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "No, you don't understand. They'll find me. They'll come and take me back. And this time they won't let me wake up. They'll keep me forever. They can't. They can. They've been doing this for longer than you can imagine. They have ways of making people disappear, of making investigations go away, of making sure no one ever finds out what they're doing." Her grip tightened. "The police can't help. No one can help. The only thing you can do is run, as far and as fast as you can, and pray they don't come after you." I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to insist that there was some authority, some institution, some force of law and order that could put a stop to what was happening. But I'd spent weeks trying to find that authority, and I'd come up empty. Whatever the Morrows were, they'd been doing this for over a century. They knew how to avoid detection, they knew how to protect themselves, and they knew that I knew. The thought hit me like a physical blow. I'd gone into their house, I'd seen their operation. I'd looked into Mrs. Morrow's eyes and seen her look back at me. They knew who I was, they knew where I lived. They'd let me go that night, for reasons I couldn't fathom, but they wouldn't let me go forever. Sooner or later, they'd come for me, and when they did, I'd end up in one of those beds, sleeping away the years while something ancient fed on my time. "We need to leave," I said. "Both of us. Tonight." Sarah shook her head. "You need to leave. I can't come with you." "Why not?" "Because they'll be looking for me. They'll track me, and they'll find me. And anyone who's with me will be found too." She met my eyes, and I saw a determination there that I hadn't expected. "I'm going back." "What? No, that's insane. It's the only way. If I go back now, before they realize I'm gone, maybe they won't notice. Maybe I can slip back into my bed and pretend I never left. And if I can do that, then maybe someday, when the time is right, I can find a way to bring them down from the inside." "That's not a plan," That's suicide. It's hope, Sarah said quietly. It's the only hope any of us have. Someone has to stop them, and it might as well be me. I wanted to stop her. I wanted to grab her and force her to come with me, to run, to survive. But I could see in her eyes that she'd made up her mind. And some part of me, the same part that had walked into that house in the first place, recognized that she was right. Running would only delay the inevitable. Someone had to stay and fight. I just wasn't sure that someone should be me. Wait 3 days, I said. Give me 3 days to get away, to get far enough that they can't find me, and then do whatever you have to do. Sarah nodded. 3 days. I can manage that. We sat together until dawn, talking about nothing in particular. Her life before, my life before, the places we'd been, and the people we'd loved. It felt like the calm before a storm, a moment of stillness before everything fell apart. When the sun came up, Sarah slipped back through the gap in the fence. I watched her cross the yard and disappear into the house, and I prayed that I'd made the right choice by letting her go. Then I packed my bags, got in my car, and drove. I didn't stop for 300 miles. I drove through the night and into the next day, putting as much distance between me and that house as I possibly could. I paid cash for everything. I turned off my phone. I stayed off the main roads, taking back routes and side streets that wouldn't be watched. I ended up in a small town in another state, a place I'd never been before and had no connection to. I rented a room in a motel that didn't ask for ID, and I stayed there for a week, barely eating, barely sleeping, waiting for them to find me. They didn't come. A week turned into 2. 2 turned into a month. I started to believe that maybe I'd gotten away, that maybe they'd decided I wasn't worth the trouble, that maybe Sarah's sacrifice had bought me more time than I'd dared to hope. I got a job at a diner in town, found an apartment, started building a new life, carefully, cautiously, always watching over my shoulder, always ready to run again if I had to. But as the months passed, I started to relax, started to let my guard down, started to believe that the nightmare was over, that I was safe, that I could stop looking at every stranger like they might be one of them. That was my first mistake. I was walking home from work one evening, maybe 6 months after I'd left Ridgewood, when I noticed someone following me. A woman, young, with dark hair and a face that was too perfect to be natural. She wasn't trying to hide. She was just walking behind me, keeping pace, watching me with those empty eyes that I remembered from my nightmares. I ran, ducked into an alley, cut through a parking lot, doubled back on myself. When I finally looked behind me, she was gone. But I knew what her presence meant. They hadn't forgotten me. They were still watching, and sooner or later, they were going to make their move. I should have run again. Left town that night, found somewhere new, kept moving until there was nowhere left to go. But I was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being afraid. So instead of running, I started preparing. I found a gun. I don't know if it would work against whatever the morrows were, but it made me feel better to have it. I reinforced my apartment doors. I installed motion sensors and cameras. I stopped going out at night, and I started researching again. The internet had things that the local library didn't. Forum posts from people who'd experienced strange things. News articles from other towns, other states, describing patterns that sounded eerily familiar. Academic papers on folklore and myth, on creatures that fed on human life force, on families that had maintained their youth for centuries through means that no one wanted to examine too closely. The Morrows weren't unique. There were others like them, scattered across the country, across the world. Families that had found ways to cheat death, to extend their lives indefinitely at the cost of those around them. They had different names, different methods, different histories, but they were all feeding on the same thing: time, life, the years that belonged to other people. I found communities online of people who'd survived encounters with them, people who'd lost family members to houses like the Morrow House, people who were trying to fight back, to expose the truth, to bring down the families that had been preying on humanity for generations. I joined them, started sharing what I knew, what I'd seen, what I'd learned, connected with others who'd had similar experiences, built a network of survivors and investigators and ordinary people who'd stumbled into the same nightmare I had. It felt good to be doing something, to be fighting back instead of just running, to have a purpose beyond mere survival. But I should have known it wouldn't last. They came for me on a Tuesday night, almost 8 months after I'd fled Ridgewood. I was asleep in my apartment, the gun under my pillow, my defenses in place, and I woke to find the tall man standing at the foot of my bed. He was exactly as I remembered him. That too smooth face, those black eyes, that impossible stillness. He looked down at me with an expression that might have been amusement, or contempt, or something else entirely. "You've been busy," he said. His voice was like stones grinding together, making friends, sharing stories, trying to expose us. I reached for the gun. It wasn't there. "Looking for this?" He held it up, turned it over in his hands, like a curiosity. "Such a primitive thing. Do you really think it could hurt us? What do you want?" "What we've always wanted. What everyone wants." He set the gun down on the dresser, well out of my reach. To survive, to continue, to exist beyond the brief flicker of mortal life, by stealing from others, by accepting what's offered. He stepped closer, and I pressed myself back against the headboard, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "You think we take without consent? You think we force our way into people's lives? No. We wait. We watch. We let them come to us. The residents at Ridgewood didn't come to you. You took them. They were alone, abandoned, forgotten by the families who should have cared for them." His black eyes glittered in the darkness. "We gave them purpose. We gave them belonging. We gave them more years of life than they would have had otherwise. And in return, they gave us their time. That's not consent. That's predation. Call it what you like. It's nature. The strong feed on the weak. The eternal feed on the mortal. It's been this way since the beginning, and it will continue long after you and your little network of truth seekers have crumbled to dust." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream, to fight, to do something other than cower in my bed while this creature loomed over me. But I was frozen, paralyzed by a fear so deep it felt like drowning. The tall man smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "You could join us," he said. "Some mortals do, you know. They serve us willingly, in exchange for a share of what we harvest. They live longer than their peers, stay healthier, avoid the diseases and decline that come with age. It's not a bad arrangement, if you're willing to accept it. I'd rather die. That can be arranged as well." His smile faded. "But I think we'll try something different. You've seen too much. You know too much. Killing you would just make you a martyr. And we've learned from experience that martyrs cause more trouble than they're worth. Then what? You're going to forget." He reached out and touched my forehead with one cold finger. "Everything you've seen, everything you've learned, everything that happened at Ridgewood, it's all going to fade away, like a dream you can't quite remember, and you're going to go on with your life, never knowing that anything was wrong." I tried to pull away, but I couldn't move. His touch felt like ice spreading through my skull, freezing my thoughts, numbing my memories. "Don't," I managed to say. "Please. It's already done." He withdrew his hand and stepped back. "You'll wake up in the morning feeling refreshed, happy even. You'll have no memory of this conversation, or of me, or of anything that brought you here. You'll be a blank slate, ready to start over." The cold was spreading. I could feel my thoughts slowing down, my memories becoming fuzzy and indistinct. I tried to hold on to them, the house, the lights, the sleeping figures in their beds, but they slipped through my fingers like water. "There is one thing you should know," the tall man said, his voice already sounding far away. "Your friend, Sarah, the girl who went back, she tried to fight us from the inside, just as she promised she would. I wanted to ask what happened to her. I wanted to know if she was okay, but I couldn't form the words. I couldn't form any words. Everything was fading, dissolving, disappearing into the cold. She failed," he said. "They always do." And then there was nothing. I woke up the next morning in my apartment, sunlight streaming through the windows, feeling better than I had in months. I couldn't quite remember why I'd been so stressed lately, why I'd moved to this town, what I'd been running from. But whatever it was, it didn't seem to matter anymore. I went to work at the diner. I smiled at the customers. I made small talk with my coworkers. I lived my life, day after day, week after week, never knowing that there was something I'd forgotten. But there are cracks in the forgetting, small moments when something feels wrong, when a shadow moves the wrong way, or a stranger's eyes seem too dark, or a smell drifts past that triggers a memory I can't quite grasp. In those moments, I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something vast and terrible, looking down into an abyss that I can't see but can sense waiting below. Sometimes, late at night, I wake up with the feeling that I should be watching something, that there's a house somewhere, a window with a light moving behind it, and I need to keep my eyes on it or something terrible will happen. But I don't know what house. I don't know what light. I don't know anything, except this nagging feeling that something important was taken from me, and I need to get it back. I found a notebook in my apartment a few weeks ago. It was hidden in the back of my closet, in a box I didn't remember packing. The notebook was filled with handwriting that looked like mine, but I don't remember writing any of it. Pages and pages of notes about a place called Ridgewood, about a family called Morrow, about missing people and strange lights, and a house that smelled like something rotting. I read the whole thing. I didn't understand most of it, but when I finished, I felt something stirring in the back of my mind, a memory trying to surface, a truth trying to break through. They took my memories, but they couldn't take the notebook. They couldn't take the evidence. And somewhere, deep down, the knowledge is still there, waiting to be uncovered. I've started the research again, carefully, quietly, without drawing attention to myself. I've found the online communities I apparently used to be part of, the people I used to talk to, the information I used to share. They remember me, even if I don't remember them. They've filled in some of the gaps, told me things I used to know, helped me understand what was done to me. The Morrows are still out there, still feeding, still taking people from the edges of society, the forgotten ones, the ones nobody will miss. And there are others like them, in other towns, other states, other countries. A whole network of predators, hiding in plain sight, harvesting human lives to extend their own. I don't know if I can stop them. I don't know if anyone can. They've been doing this for centuries, and they'll probably keep doing it for centuries more, but I have to try. Because somewhere in that house, in one of those beds, there are people who deserve to be saved. People like Margaret and Robert and Sarah and all the others I've forgotten. People who are trapped in an endless sleep, their time being stolen, their lives being drained away to feed something that should have died long ago. I failed them once. I ran away when I should have stayed and fought. I let them take my memories when I should have held on tighter. I won't make those mistakes again. The notebook ends with an address, Ridgewood Senior Care, a town I've never heard of, in a state I don't remember visiting. But according to my own handwriting, I lived there once. I worked there. I saw things there that changed me forever. I'm going back. I don't know what I'll find when I get there. Maybe the Morrow house has been demolished. Maybe the family has moved on, found somewhere new to do their feeding. Maybe everything I wrote in that notebook was a delusion, a fantasy, the product of a mind that cracked under stress and couldn't tell the difference between reality and imagination. But I have to know. I have to see for myself. I have to understand what happened to me, what was taken from me, what I lost. And if the house is still there, if they're still operating, if people are still disappearing into that faded blue building with its dark windows and its overgrown yard and its smell of sweet rot, then I'm going to do something about it. I don't know what, exactly. I don't have a plan. I don't have weapons or allies or any of the things I would need to take on creatures that have been doing this for over a century. But I have something they don't expect. I have determination, I have fury, and I have nothing left to lose. They tried to erase me. They tried to make me forget. They thought they could take my memories and send me back into the world as if nothing had happened. They were wrong. I remember now. Not everything there are still gaps, still holes where memories should be, still moments that feel fuzzy and indistinct. But I remember enough. I remember the house. I remember the light. I remember what I saw in that room full of sleeping bodies. And I remember a girl named Sarah who went back because she believed someone had to fight. She was right. Someone does. This time, it's going to be me. The drive back to Ridgewood takes 2 days. I don't hurry. I don't need to. Whatever's waiting for me there has been waiting for a long time. A few more hours won't make a difference. I spend the drive thinking about what I'm going to do, how I'm going to get into the house, how I'm going to find Sarah, if she's still there, how I'm going to bring the whole operation crashing down, even if it costs me everything. I don't have answers to any of these questions, but I have the drive, winding through green hills and small towns and stretches of empty highway. I have time to think, to plan, to prepare myself for whatever comes next. When I finally reach Ridgewood, the sun is setting. The town looks exactly as I don't remember it. Small streets, old buildings, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and strangers stand out. The senior care facility is still there. So is the carriage house where I apparently lived. So is the fence, and the gap in the boards, and the overgrown yard beyond. And so is the house. The Morrow house. Faded blue siding, dark windows. That feeling of wrongness that I remember now, that I've been missing without knowing what I was missing. I sit in my car and I watch as the light fades and darkness settles over the neighborhood. And then, right on schedule, I see it, a light in the upper window, moving slowly from one side of the house to the other, back and forth, back and forth. They're still there, still operating, still doing whatever it is they do to the people they take. I don't know what's going to happen when I go back into that house. I don't know if I'll come out alive. I don't know if anyone will ever know what happened to me or care, but I'm going anyway. Because some things are worth fighting for, even when you can't win. Some evils are too great to ignore, even when fighting them is hopeless. Some battles have to be fought, not because victory is possible, but because surrender is unthinkable. I open the car door and step out into the night. The air smells like cut grass and something else underneath it. Something sweet, something rotten, something familiar. I walk toward the fence, toward the gap in the boards, toward whatever's waiting for me on the other side, and I don't look back. That was 3 weeks ago. I want to say that I succeeded. I want to tell you that I walked into that house and found Sarah and freed all the sleeping prisoners and brought the Morrow family to justice. I want this story to have a happy ending, the kind where good triumphs over evil and the hero walks away into the sunset. But that's not how it happened. I don't remember most of it. The memories are fragmented, incomplete, scattered like leaves after a storm. I remember going through the fence. I remember the back door, still unlocked. I remember the smell hitting me like a wall, so strong I almost turned back. I remember finding the room, the beds, the bodies, so many more than before. Rows upon rows of sleeping figures, their chests rising and falling in that same synchronized rhythm. I remember finding Sarah, 3rd row from the back, halfway down. Her face peaceful, unmarked by whatever they'd done to her in the months since I'd seen her last. I remember trying to wake her, shaking her, calling her name, begging her to open her eyes. But she didn't respond. None of them did, whatever sleep they were in. It was deeper than anything I could break through. And I remember the moment when I realized I wasn't alone. Mrs. Morrow was standing behind me, the tall man beside her, and others, more of them than I'd expected. A whole family of those 2 perfect faces and empty eyes surrounding me in that room full of stolen lives. "We hoped you'd come back," Mrs. Morrow said. Her voice was still that wind through dead leaves whisper. "We've been waiting." I tried to run. I don't remember what happened after that. There are flashes, hands grabbing me, something cold pressing against my face, a feeling of falling that went on forever, but nothing coherent, nothing that makes sense. The next thing I remember clearly is waking up in a hospital 200 miles from Ridgewood. I'd been found on the side of the highway, unconscious, with no identification and no memory of how I'd gotten there. I'd been in a coma for almost a week. The doctors couldn't explain what had caused it. They ran every test they could think of, but everything came back normal. My brain was fine. My body was fine. I was just not there for a while. When I finally woke up, I remembered everything. Not just what had happened at the house, but all the things they'd tried to make me forget. The memories they'd taken the first time came flooding back, mixing with the new memories in a jumbled mess that took days to sort through. I don't know why. I don't know if their memory erasure failed somehow, or if something about going back triggered a recovery, or if they wanted me to remember this time for some reason I can't fathom. All I know is that I'm still here, still alive, still carrying the weight of everything I've seen. I tried to go to the authorities. I really did. I called the police, the FBI, every agency I could think of. I told them everything: the house, the bodies, the family that had been preying on people for over a century. No one believed me. The Ridgewood Police Department told me there was no record of any missing persons from the senior care facility. The place had closed down years ago, they said. There was no one to go missing. The FBI agent I talked to suggested I seek psychiatric help. She gave me a number for a crisis hotline and told me to take care of myself. When I tried to visit Ridgewood myself, I found the town had changed. The senior care facility was gone, replaced by a strip mall. The carriage house was gone. The fence was gone. And the Morrow house was just an empty lot, overgrown with weeds, with a for sale sign that looked like it had been there for years. They erased it, all of it, packed up their operation and disappeared, leaving no trace that they'd ever been there. And somehow, they changed the records too, the property files, the census data, the newspaper archives. Everything I'd found before was gone, replaced by a history that had never happened. I searched for weeks, months. I went back to the online communities, the survivor networks, the people who'd helped me before. Some of them remembered me, some of them didn't, and all of them told me the same thing: the Morrows were gone. But that doesn't mean they're really gone. It just means they moved somewhere else, set up shop in a new town, found new prey, started the whole operation over again. They're out there right now, somewhere, in a house that looks normal from the outside, living their eternal lives, sustained by the time they steal from others. And there's nothing I can do about it. I've accepted that now. I'm not a hero. I'm not going to save anyone. Whatever the Morrows are, whatever all the families like them are, they've been doing this for longer than human memory. They know how to survive. They know how to hide. They know how to make anyone who threatens them disappear. All I can do is tell my story and hope someone listens. Hope that someday someone finds the strength I lacked. And if you're reading this, remember, always trust your instincts. The things that feel deeply wrong usually are very deeply wrong. They're still out there, watching, waiting, and I can't stop looking over my shoulder.